My sister called my baby a puppy, I gave her up and pissed her off at her wedding. I kept my promise to my wife, Honey, to wait before reacting to the chaos Clara had unleashed. Honey has always been my anchor, the steady hand that reins me in when my emotions threaten to boil over. She knew I was ready to go nuclear the moment Clara crossed the line, but her calm reasoning convinced me to hold back and approach the situation with a level head. In hindsight, Honey was right. My sister's downward spiral had already ignited its own implosion, and I didn't need to add fuel to the fire. But before I delve deeper, let me clarify some misconceptions and set the record straight. There seems to be a lot of speculation, and while I understand how messy things appear, context matters. I am the eldest of my siblings, a role that has defined much of my life. Our parents, hardworking and ambitious, ran businesses that consumed most of their time. They were often away, working 7 days a week, and while they loved us, their absence left me to shoulder responsibilities far beyond my years. I was the one cooking dinners, helping with homework, and trying to fill the emotional void their absence created. I know this isn't considered normal in most households. Some might even call it neglect. But my parents didn't know any better. They came from a generation where providing financially was synonymous with good parenting. I don't hate them for it. If anything, I'm grateful that I could step up and give my younger siblings a sense of security I never had. Of course, there's a price for everything. Taking on so much so young left its mark on me. Scars I'm still working through in therapy. But it also taught me resilience, responsibility, and most importantly, the value of protecting those you love. My siblings felt safe because I was there for them, and that's something I will always be proud of. When our parents became ill, I stepped into an even larger role. For years, I managed their finances, oversaw their properties, and took care of their medical needs. Dad's mental health began to decline, and his frustration often manifested in verbal abuse. Mom, overwhelmed with depression, became blunt and emotionally distant. They were incredibly challenging to deal with during their final years, but I don't hold any ill will toward them. They were human, flawed like all of us, and I tried to honor their memory by taking care of everything they left behind. My siblings, however, distanced themselves. Dad's temper and Mom's withdrawal pushed them away, and when Dad altered his will out of hurt, Mom followed suit. In the end, I inherited the majority of their estate. It wasn't out of favoritism or manipulation, as some have implied. It was a result of practicality. I had already been managing their affairs for years. That said, my siblings weren't left empty-handed. Each received a sizable inheritance, with 3 of them inheriting all but one of our parents' businesses. Trust funds were set up for everyone. They were all taken care of. Clara, however, squandered her share. After Mom's death, Clara spiraled into a full-blown mental health crisis. Before we could get her the help she desperately needed, she drowned herself in escapism, traveling, drinking, and gambling away every penny she inherited. It was a heartbreaking spectacle, watching my once close sister unravel before my eyes. But even then, I tried to help her. For those questioning why I paid Clara's rent this month, let me explain. The payment was already automated, and by the time I realized what was happening, it was too late to cancel. Does that mean I'm rewarding her behavior? Absolutely not. It means I'm ensuring she isn't homeless. At least for now. Moving forward, she is on her own. I have no intention of enabling her self-destruction any further. Yesterday was a day I'll never forget, though I wish I could erase it from my memory entirely. The sight of Clara standing on my doorstep, disheveled and desperate, should have been a moment of pity. Instead, it ignited a torrent of anger and frustration that had been simmering for far too long. Clara was crying, her face streaked with mascara and her hands trembling as she knocked incessantly. She begged me to let her in, her voice breaking as she pleaded for a chance to make things right. I wouldn't. Not after everything she had done to my family. Honey and a few of her friends were inside, and I knew their presence alone would escalate things further. Clara had emotionally abused my daughter, Decker, and even physically harmed Honey in the past. Allowing her inside was out of the question. I stood firm, my voice cold and resolute as I told her to leave. I reminded her that she had been explicitly told, in writing, never to come to my home again. I chose my words carefully, knowing the importance of having a clear record of this interaction. If she refused to leave, I would call the police. But Clara didn't budge. She continued to beg, saying she wanted to apologize to Decker, that she had been drunk, upset, and made mistakes. I could smell the alcohol on her breath and see the unsteady sway of her movements. She wasn't just drunk. There was something else in her system, though I couldn't be sure what. Her words only fueled my anger. Mistakes? A mistake is spilling coffee or forgetting a birthday. It is not relentlessly bullying a traumatized teenage girl, making her feel unloved and unwanted, or sending texts that cut to the core of her self-worth. Clara had called Decker worthless and expendable. Worthless. Expendable. I couldn't wrap my head around how anyone, let alone my own sister, could say such vile things to a child. My voice rose before I even realized it, each word laced with the fury of years spent trying to shield my family from Clara's toxicity. I told her she was selfish, spoiled, and delusional to think she could waltz back into our lives without consequence. I laid bare the truth she refused to see, that she wasn't entitled to the money our parents left behind, or the life Honey and I had built together. She had burned every bridge and poisoned every relationship with her actions. And then it happened. Clara slapped me. The sting of her hand against my face was less shocking than the words that followed. She called me a traitor. She accused me of choosing a demon spawn over my real family, as though Decker wasn't just as much my family as Clara was. Her words were venomous, dripping with hatred and resentment that had clearly been festering for years. Before I could react, before I could make the bad choice I was teetering on, Honey appeared. She must have been standing by the door, listening, because she yanked me inside with a strength and urgency that snapped me out of my rage. Her voice was steady, but her words cut like a knife. She gave Clara 60 seconds to leave before she called the police, then slammed the door in her face. I stood there, shaking with anger and disbelief as I watched Clara retreat down the driveway. Honey called the police immediately, and we spent the next hour compiling evidence. The footage from our property cameras, the threatening texts Clara had sent me, the hateful messages about Decker. It all went into a Google Drive folder. I sent the link to my siblings and to Kevin, Clara's fiancé. Clara's response was predictably unhinged. She flooded my phone with texts, each more vile than the last. She called me every name under the sun and ended with a message that will haunt me for a long time. She hoped I would take my own life so she could celebrate. I blocked her number after that, but the damage was done. Once the house was quiet again, the weight of the day crushed me. I collapsed onto the couch and cried. The kind of deep, soul-wrenching sobs that leave you gasping for air. I tried to pull myself together before Decker came home from practice. She didn't need to see me like this. I put on my mom face, made sure she did her homework, and pretended everything was fine. But the moment she was settled in for the evening, I retreated to the den and called my aunt, Decker's biological grandmother. She needed to know what was happening. She deserved to know that Clara was spinning new conspiracy theories about me, claiming I was harming Decker. My aunt's voice was filled with concern and fear. She warned me to be careful, saying she believed Clara was having a mental break and might do something even more reckless. Her words only deepened the pit in my stomach. Clara wasn't just a danger to my family. She was a danger to herself. Honey and I spent the rest of the night preparing. We worked on a protective order to keep Clara away from us and Decker. We contacted Decker's school to ensure no one but us could pick her up, and we started looking for a lawyer, knowing this was only the beginning of what would likely be a long and painful legal battle. I reached out to one of my brothers, hoping he might help check on Clara, but his response left me reeling. "Can't you handle this?" he said, his voice dismissive. "This drama is too much and I'm busy." I hung up on him, stunned and furious. My other brother agreed to check on Clara, but made it clear he wouldn't do more than ensure she hadn't harmed herself. "Beyond that, she can get wrecked for all I care," he said. My aunt's warning still rang in my ears as Honey and I worked tirelessly to secure some semblance of safety and order. Clara was spiraling, her behavior growing more erratic by the day, and the renewed conspiracy she was weaving about me harming Decker was both infuriating and terrifying. My aunt suspected Clara was having a full-blown mental break and might do something reckless, or worse. We spent the entire day locked in a battle with bureaucracy, filing for a protective order against Clara. Honey took charge of contacting Decker's school, making it crystal clear that only Honey and I were authorized to pick her up, no exceptions. Meanwhile, I reached out to an attorney, knowing this situation required legal intervention. Clara's actions had gone far beyond family drama. They were now a direct threat to my family's safety and stability. Despite everything Clara had done, part of me still held out hope that my siblings would step up to help her, or at least help me navigate this nightmare. I called my eldest brother, thinking he might have some insight or advice. Instead, his response floored me. "Can't you handle this?" he said, his tone devoid of empathy. "This drama is too much, and I'm busy." For a moment, I was too stunned to respond. Then the words burst out of me like a dam break. "Are you kidding me right now?" I demanded, my voice shaking with disbelief and anger. Before he could say anything else, I hung up, unwilling to waste another second on his apathy. Thankfully, my sister arrived shortly after. She had always been a grounding presence, and her support in moments like these was invaluable. Together, we went over the legal paperwork, double-checking every detail to ensure there were no loopholes Clara could exploit. My other brother, to his credit, agreed to check on Clara, but his compassion only went so far. "I'll make sure she hasn't hurt herself," he said. "But beyond that, she can get wrecked for all I care. She's made her bed." His words stung, though I couldn't entirely disagree. Clara's actions had alienated almost everyone around her, and while I understood the exhaustion my siblings felt, it didn't make their indifference any easier to bear. Then came the call from Kevin, Clara's fiancé. His voice was shaky, a mixture of desperation and exhaustion. He had gone through the Google Drive I'd shared, and he was horrified by what he saw. Please, he begged, don't call the police on her. She's been going through a really bad time. She's struggling with drinking, and she's been stealing my medications. I'm trying to get her help, but if she gets arrested, I don't have the funds for bail or legal help. His words should have softened me, but instead, they ignited a new wave of frustration. Clara's struggles were real, yes, but they didn't excuse the havoc she had wreaked on my family. It's too late, I told him firmly. The police have already been called. She needs help, Kevin, real help. Get her into rehab or a treatment program, but keep her away from me and my family. Kevin's voice cracked as he continued to plead, asking if we could help pay for a facility he was considering. I was stunned by his audacity. After everything Clara had done, after she had emotionally terrorized Decker and physically harmed Honey, he had the nerve to ask for financial help? No, I said, my voice as unyielding as stone. That's not my responsibility. You need to figure this out, but leave me out of it. Kevin broke down, crying as he accused me of being an awful sister who didn't care about Clara's struggle. His words cut deep, reopening wounds that I thought had scarred over, but I didn't relent. I do care, I said finally. That's why I've spent years trying to help her. But there's a line, Kevin. She crossed it. She didn't just hurt me. She hurt my family, my daughter, my wife, and I won't let her continue to tear us apart. After the call ended, I sat in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on me like a boulder. No matter what I did, it felt like the wrong choice. I was trapped in an impossible situation, torn between my love for a sister I no longer recognized and my duty to protect my family. Honey found me like that, slumped on the couch, my face buried in my hand. She didn't say anything. She just sat beside me and held my hand. We'll get through this, she said softly. One step at a time. Kevin's words stayed with me long after the call ended. The accusation that I didn't care about Clara and her struggles cut deeply, reopening old wounds I thought I had buried. I had spent years trying to help her, doing everything in my power to support her while keeping my own family safe. And yet, in Kevin's eyes, and perhaps in Clara's, I was the villain in this story. I sat alone in the house, waiting for the police to call back, my thoughts a chaotic whirlwind. Honey had gone to pick up Decker from school, sparing me the worry of facing Clara lurking near the campus. The house felt eerily quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies every doubt and regret. The weight of everything bore down on me like a crushing tide. No matter how hard I tried to justify my decisions, nothing felt right. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had failed. Not just Clara, but my entire family. I was supposed to be the glue that held everything together, the one who stepped up when no one else could. But now I felt like I was unraveling. My strength stretched so thin it was bound to snap. When the police finally called, their tone was professional but detached. They had reviewed the evidence and assured me that they were taking the situation seriously. A protective order was already in motion, and they would be contacting Clara to enforce it. Hearing those words should have been a relief, but instead, they left me hollow. Would it really change anything? Would a piece of paper stop Clara from spiraling further? Would it protect Decker from the lies Clara was spreading, or shield Honey from the pain of what Clara had done? I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't keep fighting this battle alone. Honey and Decker returned shortly after, their presence pulling me out of my spiraling thought. Honey gave me a look, one that spoke volumes without saying a word. She knew I was on the brink and was there to ground me, as she always had. Decker bounded in, her backpack slung over one shoulder, and flopped onto the couch beside me. Her smile was bright, her energy infectious, and for a moment, the weight on my chest lifted. She didn't know the full extent of what was happening, and I intended to keep it that way. Decker had already been through so much. She didn't need to carry this burden, too. Hey, Mom, she said, pulling out her homework. Can you help me with this? I think my teacher made it extra confusing just to mess with us. I laughed, a sound that felt foreign but welcome. Of course, kiddo. Let's figure it out together. As we worked through her assignments, the world outside faded into the background. For those precious moments, it was just the two of us, and I clung to that normalcy like a lifeline. Later that evening, after Decker was in bed, Honey and I sat in the quiet of the living room. She held my hand, her thumb brushing over my knuckles in soothing circles. You did the right thing, she said softly, her voice steady and sure. Did I? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It doesn't feel like it. No matter what I do, it feels wrong. I can't fix this. I can't fix her. And I can't shake this feeling that I've failed everyone. Honey turned to face me, her eyes full of unwavering love and understanding. You're not a failure. You've done everything you could and more. But Clara's choices aren't your responsibility. You've given her chances. You've tried to help, and she's thrown it all back in your face. At some point, you have to let go, for your own sake and for ours. Her words sank in slowly, like water seeping into dry soil. She was right. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself on the altar of my family's dysfunction. I had my own family to protect, my own sanity to preserve. As the days turned into weeks, the situation with Clara remained tense, but contained. The protective order kept her at bay, and with Kevin's help, she finally entered a rehabilitation program. It was a small step, but it gave me hope that she might find her way back to the sister I once knew. My siblings remained distant, their indifference a painful reminder of the fractured bonds between us, but I couldn't dwell on their apathy. I had Decker, I had Honey, and I had the life we were building together. And for now, that was enough.